Welcome to the Rock is George podcast. I'm your host, George Dionne, and this is episode 92. Thank you for tuning into the podcast through our website, rockisgeorge.com, or through our YouTube page at rockisgeorge, or on one of the many podcasting streaming apps, or at the loudest.com on the planet, knac.com. My guest for this episode is Jeremy Edge. He is the founder and mastermind behind the Jeremy Edge Project. He has a fantastic new double album set for release in two parts. The name of the album is Saints and Souls. Volume 1 drops on December 23rd, and Volume 2 drops on February 2nd, 2023. I had the chance to pick Jeremy's brain about this ambitious double album and find out more about his band. So here's Jeremy Edge of the Jeremy Edge Project. If I knew absolutely nothing about the Jeremy Edge Project, how would you describe the band's music to me?
I think I would describe it as something that seems old and familiar, but still new and fresh. Something sort of, sounds like it could be from the early 70s, but with a little bit of modern influences too.
Now, this project was born as a side project from your other band, Candlelight Red, in 2020. How did the Jeremy Edge Project, how was it born?
Yeah, actually, I would say before that, Candlelight Red actively ended around 2013-14. Although we did a few reunion shows, we did a reunion EP in last year, actually. But no, I've been doing this. Me and John and Ray have been doing this since 2017. But we went under a different name and we had a female lead singer. And we did a 3-song EP. And then we went and did a full-length album. And right before the album was finished, the singer decided to kind of leave music and go back to school and finish some things up. So it was kind of, it was very amicable, but it kind of put me in a position of what do I do with this record? So the guys kind of pushed me. He's like, oh, you should just go solo, and that's kind of where that was born out of is, it just kind of became my project because it was very much focused around guitar playing. And, I had kind of the musical direction I wanted to go in. And so it was a natural progression, I guess.
And it's completely different style of music than what you did with Candlelight Red.
Yeah. But since I've been playing guitar and playing in bands and stuff, it's not really a far stretch from what I've done over the years. It's just, I had two bands that did modern rock, which was Candlelight Red, and before that Backstreet Law, and I've kind of done this stuff in between and kind of grew up on this music with two older sisters and a dad who was a musician. So, that I feel like it's always kind of been home is like the 70s rock and the bluesy stuff. And mainstream rock has kind of been that thing for a long time. It was, in the early 2000s, it was that juggernaut of, you really couldn't play rootsy rock stuff and expect to get a record deal or get on the radio. You had to kind of tune the guitars down and dumb it down a little bit, so we did that for a little while, but that this is kind of I think it's allowed me to kind of go back to being a guitar player and not have to be in that thing of expectation of, hey, is this heavy enough for rock audiences? Is this cool enough to be with the latest batch of things that kids are into or whatever? And it's kind of like, I don't care, anymore. It's like I do what I want,
So on December 23rd, you're releasing your sophomore album, Saints and Souls. Is coming in 2 volumes. Volume 1 in December, Volume 2 in February. This is quite an ambitious project, I would say, for someone only on their second album.
Yeah, it was extremely ambitious. And I think the way I talked myself into it is, I grew up on vinyl. Like I said, I had 2 older sisters, and I sort of inherited their vinyl collection when I was a kid. And, I thought about all those artists like Jimi Hendrix and Deep Purple and the Beatles and Zeppelin. And in the span of 3, 5, 7 years, you got these bands that put out an amazing amount of music. Like they do like 2 records a year and touring too. And now it's kind of not unusual for an artist to spend 3 to 5 years between records. And I just thought that was kind of, yeah, it's just not, it just doesn't jive with me, you know? I think during the pandemic, a lot of us had a lot of isolation, a lot of time to think, and it made me think of what do I want to do that is trendy and what's happening in social media do I want to pay attention to, and what things do I want to say I don't want to do that. That's not why I started doing this, and I think we want to do is just put out a lot of great music in a short amount of time. The album took about a year to do. Once we got it done, I was glad that we didn't just decide to listen to the music industry and say, hey, this is a singles market now, or are you recording more than 3 songs? And say, no, we want to put out a record. We want folks to have a listening experience,
When you say the music industry getting involved per se, did you intentionally want to put this out as a double album set and then were convinced to break it up into a couple different releases?
Sort of. But it's a lot simpler than that, is that I wanted this to be an album that was like a double album, like the Beatles' White Album. You open it up and there's a record on each side. However, if you want to get vinyl, which we really focused this record to flow like a vinyl, even if you're not listening to the record, when we went for vinyl this time, instead of 4 or 5 months turnaround, they're saying things like, 9 months to a year, and some pressing plants are not even taking new orders because there's been such a vinyl explosion that people are backed up for a whole entire year. So we finally found a plant in Eastern Europe that was willing to give us a 90-day turnaround as long as we adhered to a couple of design things. We didn't get too crazy with customization. So, so you could speed up the process. So we ended up breaking it up in 2 volumes, well, sometime down the road, if people like the record and we want to do a re-release, a limited release that's 2 joined volumes, maybe. But it just kind of worked out. It ended up being 2 separate volumes, but I think that's kind of cool because it gives people, if they just want to check out volume 1 and sit with that for a little while, and then volume 2 actually flows a little bit differently, so you get a little bit sonic journey with that anyways.
Absolutely. And the album Saints and Souls sort of has a theme delving into the folklore of New Orleans and kind of the true stories of New Orleans, but really around the celebrating the dark and the light.
I was a big Zeppelin fan, and I always used to hear Jimmy Page say that their music was about dark and light and the contrast between the two. And you can see that because they had like these monster jams, like Whole Lot of Love and things that were just in your face. And then they had like Led Zeppelin 3 was like this, had all this acoustic folk music and things going on. So there's always that contrast. Another band I liked that did that was Alice in Chains. They had, a big explosive first album, then they did like an acoustic EP, Jar of Flies, and then they did Dirt, which was another in-your-face rock album, and it was showing you the light and contrast between different things that you can do, but still be the same artist, but it's 2 sides of a coin. So I thought that played in, and also after Candlelight Red broke up, I spent a lot of time. I was kind of just didn't listen to rock music for a long time, and I spent a lot of time in New Orleans, going and listening to different styles of music and listening to different players, and there's a lot of culture there, so I absorbed a lot of that and it got inspired by a lot of that. So it's not one of those things like me trying to say like, hey, I was from here, I was born here, and it's not that at all. It's just like, hey, this was imagery and stories and things that inspired me and helped imagine what we were trying to create.
So with this dark and light theme, are they intertwined within each album, or would you say one volume represents light, the other represents dark?
I would say the second volume is somewhat darker. But there is definitely light and shade and from song to song, from album to album, and we explore a lot of different styles and influences. There's a song on the first volume that's almost a Bob Marley inspired, thing. It has much of a reggae feel. And then it goes into an end section that sounds almost like Sabbath, and then we have a gypsy swing piece on the second record, a gypsy jazz type thing. And it has kind of a dark feel to it. So yeah, it's all over the map musically. I think it all kind of sounds like me, but it'll be interesting. Like the first record I thought was a little schizophrenic, and I thought people wouldn't accept that because people are looking for you to have like one specific sound and everything that kind of sound like that. But it was well received and people liked the variety, and I'm hoping that people tend to still dig the variety and think that it helps things not to get very boring or predictable.
You have a single out now from Volume One called "Move On." If you want to talk a little bit about what inspired the lyrics of that song.
Yeah, so Move On. Basically, I just came up with a chorus. I was looking for just a chorus to go with that riff, and then of course from there I said, well, what can this be about? And I said, well, it should just be about some of the journeys that I've had as a musician and as a person, and having to move on from situation to situation, and also the traveling. Over the years I've done lots of traveling as a musician, so it has lots of up and downs, and things that happen with your interpersonal relationships because you're constantly gone and you're constantly moving. But it's also kind of like a celebration of like the gypsy spirit of just being free to move around and explore things and go on new adventures.
Also featured on the track is Derek Sherinian of Sons of Apollo and formerly of Dream Theater. Is this someone that you've worked with before, or did you answer his Facebook ad when he was advertising during the pandemic?
Sort of that. Actually, we started talking during the pandemic and we had just released a record. And he listened to the record and said that he really liked it. And we just kind of chatted back and forth about music a little bit, and it was like, well, keep in touch. And then I figured like, oh, he's like you said, I probably said, well, he's probably just looking for work and blah, blah, blah. And then, he saw me posting that I was working on new music and stuff. Like a year later, he like messages me and he said, hey man, you send me some stuff to listen to. What are you working on? And then so we just kind of worked it out where he plays on two tracks on the record that I thought were certainly up his alley, and I think he helped make those tracks kind of, get them over the finish line of where they needed to be, because he's definitely a great player. And I'm a big fan of that whole Deep Purple John Lord thing, and he can just do that, I think as well as anybody else can ever do it.
Are you planning another single from Volume One?
Possibly. I think we're gonna see what it goes. I do have a single from Volume 2 planned for February, and we shot a music video for it, and it's called Coral Castle. And it's it's probably the mellowest tune on all of the CDs. And that song has more of like an R&B flavor to it. It's almost kind of like Robin Trower and Robert Cray meets Sade, something. It's a little different. It has good, some distorted guitar in there too, and some leads and stuff, but it's very laid back and groovy. And so that's going to be for February. But right now we're getting some pretty good feedback from Move On. It's kind of I'm pleasantly surprised because it is a song. I think it sounds a lot like old Deep Purple, which I'm into, along with some Rolling Stones and some other, 70s stuff, R&B stuff in there too. We've been at good feedback so far, so I hope people dig the whole record.
So is the Coral Castle something inspired from a structure in New Orleans, or is it metaphor?
It's both, because I got the idea for the title because I read about this story of about this guy in Florida who built a castle made of coral. Because the guy actually went crazy. I guess like he got stood up at the altar and waited for the woman to return for his whole entire life out of psychosis. But he built these enormous structures, and people don't really. It's like a supernatural mystery. Like they don't know why or how he was actually able to move all these structures by himself. So it's kind of cool when you read about that, and that's something I'm kind of interested in. But I took the idea of the whole thing and kind of put that into a context as if you had like a couple, fictional characters, and one of them is kind of asking someone to like leave a bad relationship or an unhappy relationship and seeing if they'll actually do it. And said, "Why don't you just pack your things, just meet me, and we'll go away somewhere, and we won't tell anybody where you are." And that's sort of like the theme behind the song.
Some of the tracks from both albums were mixed by Kevin Shirley, very famous producer, mixer. He did Black Country Communion, Black Crows, Joe Bonamassa, and as heavy as Iron Maiden. How did you get hooked up with Kevin Shirley?
I was a fan of his for a long time because I'm a fan of the Bonamassa stuff and the stuff that he's done with his side projects too. And I'm a big fan of like, I think my favorite Zeppelin album is How the West Was Won, and he kind of remixed that and brought that back to life. He mixed the live album Live at the Greek with Jimmy Page and Black Crows. So I knew of him from that and was a pretty big fan of his work. And another thing, like during the pandemic, social media, there was a short spurt of time where he went and just kind of said, "Hey, if anybody's got some indie stuff to send me, I got a little bit of time to check it out." And he had time to do a couple songs, so I sent him a couple songs, and he was like, "Yeah, I'll do it. Give me a couple days." And then he spat it right back out, and I'm like, "Yeah, this sounds great. Sounds like Kevin Shirley." So that was very cool. Coral Castle was one of those songs. And the first track off the record, No Way Home, was mixed by him. He also mixed the song that, what was it? It's called Slow Breeze. And this is the really interesting thing that had to happen is he mixed that. And then when I took the song to the mastering engineer pointed out a lot of things that were in the track that he thought we should fix. And I'm going, I really can't do that. He said, "Well, try." So basically I had to pull up Kevin's mix and try to mix the song myself, and mixed it and A-B'd it until I thought I got the drums sounding like he did. And he was agreed. He said I managed to get it close. So that was kind of cool. It's almost like I had like a educational thing, having Kevin mix one of my songs and hearing how he did it, and I was able to A-B that and try to backwards engineer that and teach myself how to mix like that. So just working with him, I felt, gave me a little bit of knowledge. And when I sent the tracks to the guys in the band, they couldn't tell which one was Kevin's and which one was mine. So I was like, okay, I guess I'm doing this right.
What are your touring plans as far as promoting the album?
We're still booking updates for the new year. We've kind of been playing songs off the album and getting reactions this year. We played a lot of shows this year. We played shows with Lita Ford, Jackal, Randy Hansen, Derek St. Holmes. We just played a show with Gary Hoey. We played some outdoor shows. We played some smaller venues and some stuff on our own as well. And we have a show this weekend with a few of our friends, Johnny B and Ben Brandt. But yeah, we plan on having a busy year next year as the dates are shaping up, and we're hoping to expand beyond the region, hopefully too.
Are you planning anything as big and ambitious as trying to play a full album show or a full double album show?
Actually, we talked about that, and we actually have some ideas of how to make a lot where we could do an extended show where we play most of the songs off the record. The whole thing is kind of getting people to know about what we're doing, so that we're doing a lot of shows with other bands and doing a lot of opening for established acts, just so people will know who we are. And I hope that when it starts to catch on, we could put together, like our own theater show and bring the whole show element to it and do something that people want to see. But we don't want to do that too early because I feel like we're still kind of building. Although Candlelight Red had its own fan base that was getting really big. It's really kind of like starting over once you do another project. So we're kind of in the phase where we're building that up. So we hope to do that, but it's right now I feel like our we're best served kind of supporting other acts and spreading the word.
Must be interesting opening up for a band whose main instrument is a chainsaw in Jackal.
I actually opened up for them in several other different bands years and years ago. I actually grew up in the same general area in South Carolina where three of those guys were from. So,
Oh yeah.
yeah, I had done it before, so it was cool to get to see it again. I'm glad they're still going. It's cool to see.
And I feel like someone like Derek St. Holmes gets confused with the guy from Spinal Tap. Derek
Yeah,
St.
maybe.
Holmes.
Yeah, maybe so. Derek St. Holmes was great though. He did like so many. Lots of people don't know some of those Ted Nugent classics he actually sang. And he still plays and sounds like he always did. That was really cool.
That last Whitford Holmes album he did was actually fantastic.
I've got to hear that. I heard about that, and I just haven't had time. I need to sit down and listen to that because I'm a fan of Aerosmith and Brad Whitford and Derek. So that would be, I'd love to check that out.
You mentioned that Candlelight Red isn't really an active band anymore, but I saw that they released an EP back earlier this year.
Yeah, yeah. We went in the studio for a week and pounded out. We went back in with Morgan Rose and pounded out a quick EP, and it was kind of one of those things. Like those other two guys that kind of got a lot of things going on. They're running their own businesses, new kids, new toddlers, and stuff like that, and they're pretty busy. But we wanted to just kind of give it back something to the fans that were, because it's funny, there's no promotion or nothing on Candlelight Red stuff, and I'll go on to Spotify and I'm like, this song has 2.7 million streams. I mean, it's crazy. So we thought it would be good to put out some new music and kind of I don't want to say end on a high note because that sounds like we won't do it again, and the door's open where we very well could do it again. But yeah, it's just making more music and getting out there and playing isn't really a priority for those guys at the moment, but we all talk, we're all still friends. We're all have fond memories of everything that we did back in, the early 2010s, and it's a great thing. It's just, a lot of people, everybody kind of, I noticed that like people outside music will often think that bands usually just get in a fight and break up, get an argument and break up or whatever. And I've had so many experiences over the last 20 years doing this where like everyone wants to play music, but sometimes life gets in the way. Sometimes you got to move, sometimes you have a new kid, or you have to go away and take care of a relative, and sometimes it's just sometimes your family and your personal life comes first, and that's kind of it's a lot more boring of a story than saying like, hey, well, the drummer and the guitar player got into a big fight and they threw a beer bottle, and that makes for good rock and roll storytelling. But a lot of times it's just I'm one of those rare breeds where I'm just like, I'm in this for life. As long as I'm able to do it, I'll keep doing it.
Do you do any guitar studio work or help out with any other bands? I mean, it's just
I've talked about doing it because it's one of ironically, me having to kind of learn how to do some of the engineering on this record myself. I picked up kind of a new skill, and I talked to some of my friends about, doing some EPs and some recordings for them. It's been, a lot of work getting, juggling. Actually, we've been doing a lot of gigging and trying to button up the record and get that finished and stuff. So who knows what the next year will hold. Maybe I will get into doing a little bit of that, working with other bands. But after getting this done, I'm almost ready to go back to, usually I have my friend Mike Ferretti do most of the engineering. I hopefully next project I can just afford to go, hey Mike, can you just mix the whole thing? I don't have time to do all this and play guitar, you know.
Well, those are all the questions I have for you today, Jeremy. The name of the album is Saints and Souls, Volume 1 and 2. Volume 1 is out December 23rd. Volume 2, February 2nd. It's out on Deco Entertainment. The name of the project is the Jeremy Edge Project.
Well, thank you so much for having me today. I really appreciate it.
Once again, I want to thank Jeremy Edge of the Jeremy Edge Project for coming on the Rock is George podcast. Be sure to check out his latest album, Saints and Souls. Volume 1 drops on December 23rd, 2022, and Volume 2 drops on February 2nd, 2023. Head over to your favorite music streaming platform. Check out what's available. If you like what you hear, go out and buy a physical copy. Support the artist. As Jeremy told you himself, this album is geared towards vinyl, so I would pick up one of those. For all things Jeremy Edge and the Jeremy Edge Project, head over to his Facebook page, facebook.com/Jeremy Edge Music. I also want to thank Hadley Wolfram of Chipster PR and Deco Entertainment for making this interview possible. You've been great. I've been George Dionne. I'll see you again soon.